I think you can get there. I think you can hit the intersection of, okay, we're not going to get into a dangerous zone where something dystopian happens with AI, but we're still going to have tons of capital pouring into it. Most people recognize the inevitability. And so I would rather look at it from that perspective. And I keep going back to the nuclear example. We developed the bomb. What do you think was going to happen? Other countries were going to develop the bomb. You don't want to use the bomb on each other. What systems do you put in place to prevent that from happening? And so, knock on wood, we've been successful in doing that over the last 80 years. And so just take that analogy into AI. We're all going to have it. Everyone's going to end up developing it. There could be people out there that don't want any AI. They're sort of the Luddites of the community. But hey, you know what? It's happening one way or another. So let's think about it the way we do nuclear proliferation.
We are here to talk about what AI means for politics, policy, and business leadership. But I wonder if we take the politics part of it first. It was just a few weeks ago, we heard from J.D. Vance, the vice president, at the AI Action Summit in Paris. And he said the AI future is not going to be won by hand-wringing about safety. So I want to kick off this conversation by asking you, what do you think is the role of the government, and what are the guardrails, or who should be setting the guardrails?
I think one of the problems that we have to be careful of is that we are hitting each other so hard in politics that the right comes in, they smash down the left, and they disavow all their policies, and then the left comes in 4 years later, does the exact opposite. And so in this topic, I think this is really sensitive stuff, so this really shouldn't be about left or right. It should really be more about right or wrong. And so I have sat on some of these policy committees for the Congress and for the Senate, and what I would say to you, what's elemental to everybody is a little bit against what the vice president is saying. I think people want safety, and I think safety requires some levels of checks and balances. And I'm going to use the Constitution for a moment just to explain this. When we set the Constitution up, the idea behind the leadership at that time was that they didn't want any central authority really controlling anything. And so the separation of powers is something I think regulators are looking at in the context of AI, in the sense that you don't want AI as productive as it can be and as useful it is. It's been incredibly useful to me in my career last year. I'm going to tell you something political in a second about how it's helping in politics. But I think we got to make sure we're protected. And I think that's really ultimately where the regulation has to go. And hopefully our adversaries around the world, our economic competitors around the world, will adopt something similar. And I would say it's a little bit like nuclear proliferation. You know, we had a test ban treaty in the 1960s, really did help the world get off of the idea that we were going to have a itchy trigger finger to use nukes. And I think we have to get to a position on AI that there's some universality of standards. But I just want to say one thing about how AI is currently being used in politics. You can literally now ask Grok or ask ChatGPT what the policies are for the politicians, who the donors are for the politicians, what their upcoming legislation, pieces of legislation that they've written. And it's incredibly useful as an influencing tool, because if you're for something, you can reach certain politicians that are about to vote on that issue, and you can weigh in. Or if you're against something, vice versa. And I think these tools are incredible in terms of, it would probably have taken 10 people to go through those lists and go through those legislative digests to figure those things out. And it can literally happen now in minutes on your smartphone.
I want to take that first point you mentioned, though, because in some ways, the regulation, the idea of safety around AI feels like a bipartisan issue. The debate, you could argue, is can you have innovation and safety side by side? In other words, is it a binary? How do you look at that? Too many guardrails stifles innovation, or can you have both going together?
I think the vice president's point is exactly yours. We don't want too many guardrails to stifle innovation, and we want tons of capital to flow into the space. But what I'm talking about is whatever ultimately what Elon Musk is saying about AI, and just to make sure that there's things in place where there's almost like an AI check on AI, if you will, the same way we try to check ourselves in power in a legislative process or in a governmental process. And so I think you can get both of those things done contemporaneously. I don't think you need to be super fearful. I think we've got tons of use cases, tons of things that are going on around the world that people are like, wow, I could really use this. It's going to either save manpower, enhance manpower. I mean, there's a great meme out there, like you're not going to lose your job to AI, but you're going to lose your job to somebody that knows how to use AI. I think that's a really elemental thing. And so I think you can get there. I think you can hit the intersection of, okay, we're not going to get into a dangerous zone where something dystopian happens with AI, but we're still going to have tons of capital pouring into it. And I think, listen, I've been in these debates. Most people recognize the inevitability. And so I would rather look at it from that perspective. And I keep going back to the nuclear example. We developed a bomb. What do you think was going to happen? Other countries were going to develop the bomb. You don't want to use the bomb on each other. What systems do you put in place to prevent that from happening? And so, knock on wood, we've been successful in doing that over the last 80 years. And so just take that analogy into AI. We're all going to have it. Everyone's going to end up developing it, whether there could be people, not people in this room, of course, but there could be people out there that don't want any AI. They're sort of the Luddites of the community. But hey, you know what? It's happening one way or another. So let's think about it the way we do nuclear proliferation.
Yeah, although the point on
Safety
nuclear, that comparison's been made quite a lot. Some would argue in the case of nuclear technology, it was sort of the big thing. People moved very quickly, and then you had these big accidents that ultimately led to the slowdown where you didn't have any power plants being built for years. On that last point on regulation, though, I'm curious how you look at the landscape right now. It feels very fragmented. Obviously, globally, you've got the EU that has been a lot more restrictive, really the only region with full regulation in place right now. You've also got here in the US, no federal regulation, but a number of states moving very quickly, Texas, California, many others. What does that fragmented environment, you think, ultimately mean for the technology? Do you have to have the federal government leading in this environment?
I personally think so. I think if you don't listen, I mean, let's talk about the EU for a second. They are behind the 8 ball on venture capital spending in such an enormous way. It's really even hard to understand. We're 8-1 on venture capital expending. The country Israel is spending 2 times what the EU, the entire EU, 450 million people, are spending on venture capital. So I think they're making very big mistakes, and I think one of the reasons why you've had populist movements like what happened in the UK with the Brexit is that there's just ponderous bureaucracy in Brussels, ponderous regulation. It wouldn't just be on AI, it's on everything from the top of your water bottle is now, when you open it, it's attached to the water bottle. Now that may make sense from a trash point of view, but the complexity of all that, and then they had to go around and change all of the bottling systems inside the country. So I would prefer it to be done at the federal level. I think if you're a venture capitalist in this room or someone who's an AI investor, I think you want it to be centrist. California has been way left-leaning, state of Texas has been way right-leaning. Let's have some type of centrist uniformity to the regulation. So people won't remember this, but Reagan passed legislation in the 60s that provided tax relief for venture capital investing. And then when he got to Washington, he added certain measures in his first tax reform, which really made it much easier to form capital and to invest venture capital in the state of California. And that's through good tax policy and through good regulation, you formed what effectively became Silicon Valley and unleashed all of that amazing technology. So to me, it has to be a hybrid. It has to be done at both levels, but you definitely need the umbrella of the federal government to push this through.
Let's talk about what AI means from a corporate standpoint, corporate landscape. You said in the notes you sent me that you think AI will require a fundamental rethink of corporate governance structures. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, because just step back for a second. The way we do things now, there's different management styles, right? Some of us are bottlenecks. Every decision has to be made by us. Other people are delegators, or they put out a whole, agenda. But when you have AI is almost like this manifest engine on its own, and you almost need to have an AI coordinator inside the governance structure, inside the management structure, somebody overseeing what each department is doing, and then what layers of AI are doing inside those departments. I think it's going to be very, very important. I'll give you an example from a trading perspective. We do use AI for technical analysis at SkyBridge, and we're also making long-term principal investments, and sometimes we throw numbers inside of these, these sort of programs inside of AI that do analytical thinking equivalent to what a human being would do. But you have to make sure, because putting the money on, you have to make sure that it's coordinated so that you're not getting a mixed signal for short-term investing versus the long-term stuff that we're doing at the same time. And so what I have found in my own organization, when we use AI, I have to have somebody step back and look at the entire footprint of what we're doing, because sometimes you can get the signals crossed. And maybe that won't happen 10 years from now as these things become more intensely programmed.
What's the rate right now? I'm curious how often you have to correct those signals.
So it's a good question. I would say that weekly we're looking at things and saying, okay, we're getting a buy signal here, but that's really from a short-term perspective. We probably shouldn't be putting this trade on for 3 or 6 months. And then you're looking at something, you're saying, okay, they're telling you to sell this thing, but it's really a short-term sell. If you really look out forward thinking in terms of where the economy is and where the potential tax rates are going to be, et cetera, this is probably a long-term hold. I wouldn't put your Bitcoin investing into AI, by the way, because you'll be buying and selling it every 15 minutes, and I don't honestly recommend that.
I don't think we want to go there.
Just an example of it. You have to be very careful with the volatility metrics that are going on. And these investment programs are good, but they're not perfect yet. They don't think like a human being. They're not measuring that extra analytical layer of what I would call investment intuition.
How quickly you think it's advancing? I mean, when do you get to that point where you can, in fact?
Good question. I would think in the next 3 years there will be that additional layer. I'll call it synthetic intuition. You guys feel something about your businesses. You may feel something about people. The computer's not really capable of doing that. It may give you the appearance that it's doing it, but it's not quite capable of doing that. Maybe that'll happen in our lifetimes, but I think it'll be more synthetic intuition in the next 3 years.
What about the use of AI for risk management? I mean, are we there yet in terms of being able to use the technology for compliance, for example? How do you think about that?
So I think, because I've looked through these categories, we're definitely there on healthcare. Definitely can use the AI on R&D and research, efficacy, and potential dangers. You can definitely use it in diagnostics. You can put people's medical history and you can put their vital signs into AI, and it'll literally help doctors. And it'll even suggest things that doctors may not have thought of in terms of other underlying diseases that may be in there. So I think it's very good on healthcare risk management. On investment risk management, I would say that it's really good, if you guys look at it, it's really good on option strategy. We got signals maybe 2 months ago to buy puts on certain cryptocurrencies as a way to take in premium and take in cash flow, just because of flows of capital that the AI was detecting from literally being on all day, getting data from our Bloomberg all day on what's going on, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And so we didn't act on it because we're just sort of buy and hold our cryptocurrencies. But I think it's good, but it's not quite as good, I think, as things like in the healthcare space. Very good in aviation. It's going to be amazing for the automotive industry over time. It's getting really, really smart on that.
And the signals you got specifically in options trading, and that's just based on data across the terminals, correct? That's what it's trained on.
Yeah, you're taking a 24/7 market. It's downloading information from all the different crypto exchanges, and it's looking at flows, and it's looking at movement of what I would call cold storage onto exchanges. And so when you see a lot of that activity, you're potentially in a situation where you'll end up seeing a lot of selling. And then, of course, if you get a market shock or news that shocks the market, you'll end up getting that ensuing downdraft. But in other words, you could have the president, an example, putting tariffs on, taking tariffs off, putting tariffs on, but if everything is in cold storage, you're not going to see a lot of price movement, right? So if you have a combination of stuff getting moved off of cold storage into hot wallets, into exchanges, and then there's news that comes out, AI is very good at predicting that ahead of, I mean, again, unless you're going to hire somebody on a trading desk 24/7 to do this stuff for you, you can have AI do this for you now. It's very inexpensive.
How does all this inform your investment decision? Not necessarily how you're using AI, but just knowing where the technology is advancing, your engagement with it, seeing how quickly it's moving. How do you think about this, even in the medium term, but long term as well, in terms of where you put your money?
So this is my 36th year as an investor. I missed large parts of Web 1. I'll just tell this quick story. There was a guy by the name of Jeff Bezos. He came to the Sun Valley Allen & Company conference in 1999, and he made a presentation. I was sitting in the front row. Literally, we're roughly almost the same age. I think he's like 6 days younger than me, and him and I are separated by about $200 billion. I'll just set the scene. But anyway, he gave this presentation. It was absolutely brilliant. At that time, people don't remember this, but the Wall Street researchers were saying Amazon is a bookseller. It's ridiculously overpriced. This is a .com bust about to happen. And he gave this whole rendition about why he was selling books so that he could dot plot and reverse engineer the warehouses, where the warehouses should go. The books are roughly the same size and same weight, very easy to ship around. I listened to the whole thing, wrote up copious notes, said, I got to get out there and buy Amazon. The next speaker was Warren Buffett. And Buffett came on, and he said that he's a wonderful young man, Jeff Bezos. By the way, can you believe this? That company, Amazon, which has relatively no bricks and mortar, that company is worth more than Sears Roebuck. Can you guys believe this? That this legendary retailer, Sears Roebuck, is worth less than Amazon. And then he went into all the reasons why you shouldn't buy Amazon. And I'm a disciple of Warren Buffett. I ripped up my notes. I threw them in the garbage. Sears Roebuck is out of business. And let me just give you these numbers to cogitate over. If you put $10,000 into Amazon on the day that Jeff Bezos made that presentation 26 years ago, it's worth $16.5 million as of this morning. I know this because I wanted to say this to you guys when I came up here, so I priced it this morning on the plane over. Okay, so it's a $10,000 investment. Now, you would have had to go through 8 periods of time where Amazon dropped 50%, 1 period of time where it actually dropped 90%. You just had to hold it. The reason I'm bringing this up is that I think we are in 1996 for AI. And I think that there's going to be a lot of volatility and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of naysaying. But I am buying things. You know, I have bought into Anthropic privately. I've bought into Astera Labs. I've bought, obviously, have a core position in NVIDIA. And I tell my staff the same thing that I would tell you guys. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to look at it. We got Astera Labs before it went public. It went public at 15. It traded as high as 148. I think it's at 60 right now. I don't know, you could look it up, but maybe it's 68. I don't care. My attitude is I'm going to hold that position because they've got a great business and they've got great engineers in that business, I'm going to hold that position for 10 years. Let's see what happens. And I think you have to take that sort of an attitude with this. Otherwise, the journalists, the media, the volatility, all these things are going to scare you out of your positions. And I don't want that to happen to you. And it certainly did happen to me 26 years ago. And it was a big miss for me because I was right there 2 years after Amazon went public.
We'll have to have a talk in 10 years to see where we are.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great
Thank you.
to be here, guys. Thank you very much.